So let's talk about that today. So I did some research on meta awareness, just in general, because I wanted to I've never heard of this. It's out of my realm of thought processes, right? And what is meta awareness? So I looked online, and there's a couple of YouTube videos. There's not much on meta awareness at all, and there's some famous guys. I forget his name. Who talks about it? And I guess the question that somebody asks is what is meta awareness the awareness of awareness, or what is exactly meta awareness? Because the cup exists and it's half full, or is it there is no cup and the cup doesn't exist? I mean, that's really the cup is only the cup because it's in my mind and I believe that there's a cup there because I've decided that there's a cup there, or is it that the cup exists because we exist and we exist, so because we exist there is a cup, but it doesn't really exist at all? I'm lost.
So I have a take on this that is not necessarily everybody's take on this. My take on this is the answer to your question is yes. That we don't exist. We're pure consciousness. So many ancient wisdom traditions, Kashmir Shaivism, Kabbalah, so many of them tell us that the world is made out of this cosmic consciousness. They also tell us that there's, in different language, of course, in different traditions, that there's nothingness. You might want to call it the void. You might want to call it pure consciousness. But there was ... there was ... There was this pure consciousness. Now, I've heard consciousness described as awareness of awareness. To me, when you're talking about pure consciousness, what you're talking about is pure awareness, and that includes the awareness of awareness, the awareness that you're aware, okay? So it's understood in these different traditions that out of that beingness evolved everything in the universe. So that actually what we are and who we are is that divine consciousness, ultimately. And a lot of those traditions use terminology that suggests that this reality, as you suggested, is an illusion. It's not real. My take on it is, well, it's real on the physical plane. So I'm sitting in front of a little table here, and I can knock it, and I hear it, and I feel it, and if I knock it over, it'll fall on my feet. And in an embodied state on the physical plane, it's real. At the very same time, and I think this is what the mind struggles to get its head around, so to speak, to get the mind around, is the very same time we are pure consciousness, we are light, we are, in parlance of many of these traditions, we're divine. That's who we are. And that's the experience that we tap into when we meditate. That's why I often say that it's fine if you meditate to feel serenity, to calm yourself down. It's fine. But it's not the whole enchilada. The whole experience, the whole point, in my understanding, is to tap into our true nature. And at the very same time, to be who we are in the world. So when you say, let's talk about uplifting our life, that's what uplifting our life means. That we live our life more and more and more and more from that experience of our essence in the world. And sometimes we're going to fail, a lot of the time, because we have a mind and we have an ego and we have all of that. But once we have the experience, of the depth of our own being, of the strength inside, of the wisdom inside, of the love inside, of the joy inside, of the serenity, the equanimity, all of that. That's why these topics all, spill over each other, because they're all part of the equation. Once we tap into that, we want to live our lives more and more from that place, because it keeps us from getting knocked around. And the world will knock us around in the embodied state. But at the very same time, we know who we are. So it doesn't kill our spirit. Like some people will say, I feel dead inside. Well, I don't feel dead inside. I feel enlivened inside. And sometimes life spins me around and I need to take a breath in the moment or shift gears internally in the moment and go into that place that's within me all the time. And it's within every single one of us. Now, what we're cultivating as part of our meditation practice is our awareness of that. It isn't that we put it there when we're meditating. It isn't that we impose joy or serenity or strength or wisdom on our inner being. It's not like the joy comes from outside. We experience in the embodied state on the physical plane, we experience that there are all these things that make us happy and all these things that make us sad and all these things that make us angry and all of that. And what we fail to be aware of is that those feeling states are within us all the time. And when we tap into the core of our being, they're available to us. The joy is available. The serenity is available. So if we're cultivating awareness, how do we do that in meditation? What's the actual process of that? And often people will say to watch or notice or observe or be aware of what's going on. But that's the simple instruction. So at this moment, what's going on? So we're in an environment. One of the things that I'm keenly aware of these days for people is we're not sitting in a meditation room somewhere. People are sitting at home, mostly. One of the things that I find really interesting, because I watch a lot of political commentary, is you see all these very high-level people in government, like the Speaker of the House, and they're being interviewed from their own kitchen. You see the microwave behind them, or the kitchen counter, or the table off to the side, So for a lot of people who are meditating, I have people in my meditations in their bedrooms, in their living rooms, in their kitchens, wherever they are. So we're aware. When we become aware, when we notice what's going on, we notice that there are sounds outside. There are workmen and women outside. There are air conditioners and refrigerators have this little whir sound, and we hear all that. We notice that because we're becoming more aware. And on an inner level, we notice that we're breathing. Sometimes we notice that our heart is beating. And we notice the breath coming in and out. So when we notice that, what happens is either, and it's kind of and or, either all of the stuff that we notice bubbles up, or all the stuff that we're not noticing bubbles up, like our thoughts, our emotions, our physical sensations, or the mind gets quiet, and often it's both. So we're able to watch what the mind is doing. So this shifting, I like to call it sitting back. So we're sitting back a level. So there's all this stuff going on in our lives, in the moment. In meditation, not in meditation, there's all this stuff going on. And so we sit back a little bit, and I go, oh, not only is all this stuff going on, but I'm noticing it. I'm aware of it. I'm watching it. So, in a lot of the instruction that I've heard and been given over the years, we go about that far back. There's the drama, and we're in it, and then we sit back and we notice, oh, there's all this drama going on. And then we're aware that we're watching it. So we tend to get often that far back. Now, many years ago, I was told in meditation training and spiritual education, I was taught that there's a way to follow the thoughts back to pure awareness. I was taught that there was a way. I was never taught a way. You know, it's like somebody says, Matthew, you can get from Manhattan to Providence, Rhode Island. And you go, oh, but you need a map, or you need a GPS, or you need directions. And I was never given that. Only in the vaguest sense. You can, watch your thought and watch the thought and go behind the thought, or let go of the thought, or cut the thought short and keep going back. But I couldn't figure out how to do it. And then a few years ago, I was sitting with that question, like, how do you do that? And I stumbled on what is for me a method. And I think it's important not to be too reductionistic about it, but to understand what actually happens. And so that process and that experience is what I call meta-awareness. And so how does it work? And before I go on, did you want to say anything? Okay.
No, I'm drooling. I couldn't find it. I mean, this is unbelievable.
So how does it work? So for me, the analogy is you're watching a movie, or you're watching a show, and you're completely caught up in it. So much so, and we know this, so much so that our hormones are going off. There's a chase scene, and we're all hyperstimulated, and our hearts are racing and all of that. Or it's a love scene, and we're feeling, really romantic and engaged. Or it's, kids and puppy dogs, and we're just feeling that joy and exuberance. And then we sit back at some point and we go, it's a movie. It's a show. Now you could say it's not real, but there's a reality there. So that's what our life is. We're in these dramas, playing these roles. Sometimes it's a comedy, and sometimes it feels like a tragedy, and most of the time it's just all kinds of things going on. And we're in it. And then at some point, intermittently, we go, gosh, there's so much drama here. One of my longtime meditation students would call it the drama-rama. You're in the drama-rama. It's like a merry-go-round. You're in the drama-rama, and you can't get out of the drama-rama. You can't get off the merry-go-round. And how do you do it? You go, oh, there's this big drama going on here. Now, often when we do that, we feel pushback. It's like, stop the world, I want to get off kind of thing. I want to look for the exits. But there's a shift in awareness when we realize that it's a drama. Okay? So I'm watching this drama. I'm in a store and I'm having an altercation with a customer service person, or I'm having some other kind of encounter, and I notice that there's this drama going on. So that's kind of like step one. We're moving behind the drama. We're changing our perspective. So we see that there's a drama. And then, so I'm noticing that there's a drama, and then I'm noticing that I'm watching it. That's a different step. So you got the drama, you're watching the drama, and then you're aware that you're in the drama and watching the drama. Now, what I discovered is we can keep sitting back. And in language, it starts getting convoluted and complicated because now I'm aware, I notice, and when I lead people through this process, okay, now I'm noticing that I'm watching the drama. Okay, so I've got the drama, I'm watching it, I'm noticing that I'm watching it. And I'm aware that I'm noticing that, all of that. So you've got this whole string, and you're aware of it. What starts to happen is that the source, the object of our observation, starts to become disempowered. So you've got this event, you've got all this stuff going on, and then where your attention is going is not on that. It's on your awareness, it's on your noticing. So you're aware that you're aware. So it starts with, I'm aware of that, I notice that. And then it becomes, oh, I'm not watching that so much. What I'm really watching is me watching it. It's like that drawing of M.C. Escher's with the hands drawing the hands, drawing the hands, drawing the hands, and it's an infinite progression. It's like that. I'm watching, then I'm watching, then I'm watching. I'm aware that I'm aware that I'm aware. It starts with, I'm aware of something. The object is primary. The object is the prominent point of focus. The event, the thing I'm looking at, whatever that is. Now I'm moving back, and what becomes a point of focus is the focus itself, the awareness. So I'm aware of something, and now I'm aware that I'm watching something. And now I'm aware that I'm watching. The something has become diminished in its power. It's not magnetizing me. What's magnetizing me is, oh, I'm aware of something. I have awareness. Oh, I'm aware that I'm aware. Oh, I'm aware. So in that state, when you get to that place of, oh, I'm aware, what happens for me is everything else dissolves. What's underneath or behind or underlying that thought that I'm aware is that pure awareness that fuels everything. That's the source of all of our experience. So it can be helpful to name it along the way. It's not required, but it's helpful because it gives our mind somewhere to go. And then I find that the further back I go, so to speak, I mean, you understand that all these terms of sort of back and forward and all of that, their language. But it's also the experience that the closer you get to awareness and the further away you get from the object, the drama, the mind dissolves into awareness. It's a very profound and liberating experience. So that whole process and that state itself is what I call meta awareness. It's awareness of awareness of awareness, dot, 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 dot.
Can I just ask a question?
Please.
So we have the thing, and the thing is the drama, right? Then we have us, which is now we
Thing could be
rely.
a drama, thing could be a person, thing could be an object, but yes.
So then we have us, and now we consciously are now aware of the thing, that there's this drama happening. We're watching a fight on the street, let's say, or a guy proposing on the street, whatever, right? He's at he's in the ice rink over at Rockefeller. So he's doing that. So I'm noticing. So now I step back, and now I notice that I'm noticing. And then what happens? What are we? So now that I've noticed that I'm noticing, what's the net? We're now noticing that I'm noticing that I'm noticing. And what is this that I'm noticing now? That I am noticing that I am here in the space, and then that because of that, I'm noticing that you just keep going back and then noticing that to the point where we're just noticing that there is. Is that the?
I think there's a moment when it shifts from an activity into a state. So we're noticing that we're noticing, that we're noticing, that we're noticing. At a certain point, at least for me, it becomes, oh, I'm aware that, I mean, I'll articulate it in more language than is the experience in the moment for me, but I'm aware that I have the capacity to notice, to be aware. I'm aware not only that I'm aware of my capacity to be aware. So it's not just I'm aware that I'm aware, like we're saying words, but actually I'm aware that I have awareness. So I've moved from the activity of being in the drama to the activity of noticing, to the activity of noticing the noticing or watching it or being aware of it, to being aware that I'm aware. It doesn't have an object at that point. So there's a shift. For me, it's maybe after noticing the noticing. Oh, I'm aware that I'm noticing. I'm aware of something. I have awareness. I'm aware. See, I think that's I think the transition point. And that's, when I've taught this, that's a common question. Like, so how do I get from the I'm noticing to I'm aware? It's by articulating or naming or I would say being aware that what's going on here is my awareness. And it doesn't really matter what I'm aware of. What matters is that I know that I'm aware, that I have awareness. And all that other stuff disappears. It's like the camera has moved away from where we started. And it's now in this kind of ethereal place, like there is no camera. There's just that experience.
So I'm going to ask a few questions here. Is it an active? Are you being active or are you being passive? Can you be in, let's say I'm watching a football game. football season, right? I'm
Huh?
watching a football game. I'm active. There's a call that goes out. I hate the call. I'm really passionate. A lot of times people go afterwards, they'll say, oh man, I was really angry by the call of the ref, right? Oh, he really threw the
Right.
game, you know?
Right.
The
Great
umpire.
example.
And
Great
then,
example.
so I'm in the moment, I realized that I'm really passionate about that wasn't a strike, you know, in baseball terminology, that wasn't a strike.
Mhm.
But I now feel that, but I noticed at the time that I was really angry. Man, I was really angry, right? And is it in the moment, or is always that can I be in both spaces at once, or do I have to be in the moment, or or can I step back and like, wow, I was really angry. You know, it's like, where is it? You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that there's a rule for this, but where my mind goes when you say I was really angry,
Where I am really
what
angry.
I'm really angry about this call.
Right.
I'm so angry. And you are filled with all those emotions and all those hormones going off and all the accompanying thoughts and feelings and fantasies and all of that. You know, this ref should be fired and we could lose the whole season. You know, you could just keep going down that road, right? And this is basic sort of meditation training. And at some moment you go, oh, I'm really going down that road. I'm full of rage over this call. So that's you naming where you're at. So you're not, in that moment, maybe you're still feeling the rage, but in that moment, you've given yourself a little distance. So you're not continuing to go down the road of the rage, the frustration, whatever that is. You've pulled yourself out a little. Oh, I'm so upset by that. Oh. Now, often that's as far as we go. And maybe you take a breath and calm yourself down. Or maybe you say, it's just a game. And maybe some other part of you goes, just a game, you know, and you re-trigger yourself, you know, and you go, whoa. I don't want to be feeling this all day. I'll take another breath, right? So that's you moving away from the drama and your feeling about it, because you now see, you're now aware of what you're doing, and you get to make a choice. You see, when we have that awareness, we create choice points for ourselves. And this is somewhat basic in meditation, that we know in the meditation itself that maybe this frustration comes up. Like you're sitting in meditation, you're going, gosh, that game the other day, that really got me all triggered. And then you start feeling it again. And then in meditation, you go, wait a minute. I can breathe here. I don't want to be meditating on my displeasure, my upset. I want to calm myself down. So you make a choice to do that. And maybe you get that far. What's cool about this process, and I'm very careful to say that I didn't create it because I think it's a natural process. I discovered it, and I'm not sure, I don't believe at all that I'm the only person that has done that, but I figured out a way how to describe it that I think is understandable. So you get that far, you make the choice, okay, I don't want to go through my day being upset about this call. So I'm calming myself down. And then, oh, I'm aware that I was so angry, and now I'm calming myself down. I'm aware of that. I notice that. oh, I notice things. I'm aware of stuff. You see, and so now we're moving away from the activity of the watching. We've moved away from the activity of the upset and the flailing around and all of that. But now we're moving even back from or away from the activity of the noticing of the noticing of the noticing. Oh, I'm aware of stuff. Oh. And then, we could name all the things we're aware of in that moment. I'm aware that it's cool in here. I'm aware there are sounds outside. I'm aware that I'm hungry. Like we could name all those things. Or we could choose to be with our awareness, to hang out with it, to be in that being state, that you might even say knowing state, but I don't mean cognitively knowing. See, language gets tricky here, because when you start talking about awareness of awareness, like, what else is there to say? And I think that's what happens to the mind. When I started doing this, started practicing it before I even shared it with other people because I couldn't really figure out how to talk about it. I thought, well, I asked myself the question, like, well, what's going on here? Like, how do you actually get into the state of awareness? Like, at what point does the mind fall away? And I thought, well, maybe the mind just gets tired. Maybe the mind just doesn't want to try to figure this out anymore. Like, so I was angry at the call, and then I was watching it, and then I was aware of myself, and now I'm aware that I'm aware. It's like, can I just like sit here and be? So that's that state when we're just being. So that's the process as I can best describe it. And yes, when people do it with me, they have questions, and that's helpful. And it's experiential. And it's fun. Because I find it very liberating and nourishing to go into that space. And once we go into that space, we've unlocked the door. So I think of this process as a way of unlocking the door into our deepest awareness. And once it's like any other experience. Once we have that experience, we can call it back up. We don't have to follow the breadcrumbs.
When you unlock the door, is it the ability to constantly go back to that space of awareness, or is it just the ability to, like, I guess in a certain sense you have a certain, I don't want to use the word meta, but like you have a certain state where you're looking down on everything that's going on at all times. Am I correct on saying that, or is it the ability to realize that while it's happening in the moment, somebody gave me the wrong change, let's say, or the sports analogy is a great one, and being able to say, it's just the game's not over, so to speak. It's like the battle versus the war almost, or is that?
Yes, it's the peace after the battle and the war. It's the peace. Oh, like all that went on. It wasn't fun. It was horrible. Or maybe it wasn't so horrible. Maybe it was mundane. Maybe it was the slightest thing in the world. Somebody gave me the wrong change.
I give you a funny story. I used to go to these business meetings, and they were just like an hour or 20 minutes long or whatever, and I just never wanted to be there. So I would just zone out I mean, I would be present, but for an hour and 20 minutes, I would just zone out, knowing that it would only take an hour and 20 minutes to just sit here, right? You know, it's like one of these funny situations where you're just kind of sitting there like, this is going to pass. I just need to stand here and be present for a little bit, you know? So it's like, it's interesting.
So if you look at it from the other direction, if you look at it from the pure state, what you're actually doing is zoning in. You're zoning in on your inner being, you, at your core. So I just want to share a little terminology with you. It's just a simple phrase, but I think because, at least in our society, the word mindfulness has gotten traction. When we studied meditation on a yogic path, we were taught the term witness consciousness. And so just as you're witnessing an event, like you said, say you notice a fight on the street, so you're watching it. Now, maybe you get involved in it, but probably you don't. You're witnessing it. That's what it means. You're watching. Maybe you get emotionally involved, but then you can witness that. So when we talk about watching, what we're doing is we're witnessing. We're present. And we don't have to tangle with what's going on. We can be there and be aware. So I find it a really helpful concept.
So taking it from the other direction, so let's say you're coming in from a meditative state, pure consciousness. I notice the room around me. I see the people walking past me. I see what's going on. We're getting closer. There's this fight that's on the corner of the block, and I'm now noticing it. To be engaged, to be active would be to go join the fight, pick somebody's side. I always want to throw a punch every now and then, right? Or to break it up, let's say. But the other side is just to notice it so that maybe my safety, my human safety, my physical safety is safe, or even more so just to know that that's happening over there, just to be conscious that it's existing over there. So it's just moving the way inward so that I can realize that this is happening in the space that it's happening.
Yes, and to your earlier question, it doesn't mean that you're passive.
Okay.
It doesn't mean that there isn't action to be taken. But you take it out of that space. So maybe you pick up your phone and call 911. Or maybe you call out and say, hey guys. But you do it from that stillness inside. So I have personal experience of being on the other end of that. I may have told you this before, but I'll tell you again, or people who haven't heard it can hear it. So in 2012, I was walking into a subway and it was pouring rain, and the station was very, very wet and slippery. And as I was going into the turnstile, I slipped and fell backwards and put my hands down and hurt my hands. And there were all these people walking by. You know, it was sort of the tail end of rush hour. There were all these people walking by. Most of them didn't notice, or they thought, what's this guy standing there? He's in my way. I don't know what they thought. And a woman came up to me and said, are you okay? And I said, no. And she took out her cell phone and she called 911. And then a young man came up to me and said, are you okay? And I said, no, someone's called 911. And he said, would you like me to wait with you until they come? So it isn't that there aren't necessarily things to do. And yes, do you want to be safe? Yes. Do you want to be human? Yes. So we do often have to sort of jockey for a position within ourselves to figure out what's the thing to do or not do in the moment. But when you're coming from that place, I think where you end up is one of my favorite lines from the Bhagavad Gita, which says to have action in inaction and inaction in action. So when you're acting and when you're behaving, you're doing it from a stillness from within yourself. And when you're still, when you're quiet, there's an active stillness. So when we started meditating back in the late 70s, people thought we were dropping out of the world and that we were, going to passively live our lives in this meditative state. Now we know from brain studies, we know that when we meditate, the brain is extremely active. There's certainly certain regions of the brain that are very, very lit up in meditation. So it's not passive activity. So I think we're always striving to have that balance. But yes, you can watch it and not tangle with it. You can be in the store and somebody's shouting at you, or somebody's giving you a hard time, or somebody's giving somebody else a hard time, and you can decide what you want to do. Can I share another short story?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
All of these are going to go somewhere in the world. So the ones that come here will go somewhere else or they won't. So when I had my open heart surgery, which was in 2009, so, we're 11 years out. When I had my surgery, I did really well the whole time. I was calm, I was healthy, I was feeling good. I was traumatized. I had major surgery, but I wasn't emotionally traumatized. I was physically traumatized. And all of my encounters with everyone in the hospital, the other patients, the staff, the nurses, people who were visiting me by and large, people calling me, all of that. All of the encounters were between okay to amazing until the last day of my hospital stay. One of the nurses wanted me to take a supplement that the doctor had prescribed for me. It's not a drug. And I didn't want to take it. And she started arguing with me and said, well, your doctor prescribed this medication for you. And I said, it's not a medication. I'm not going to take it. And she continued to argue with me. And I said, maybe you should take a deep breath. And she said, why don't you? And I said, good idea. So I took a deep breath. And it was fine. I didn't take the pill that you wanted to give me. And I said, okay, now I'd like you to ask another nurse to come in. But there was no need to keep having that argument. What was the point of it? And I was starting to feel agitated for the first time in 5 days after major surgery. And you could argue and say, well, maybe the drugs were wearing off, or, I was ready to go home, whatever it was. But there was a lesson in there. And when she said to me, well, why don't I take a deep breath? It's like, yeah, that was what there was to do. For me to take a deep breath and change my state. I couldn't change the situation in the absence of that. And I couldn't change my experience in the absence of that. So it was like, oh, I'm triggered, I'm agitated, I'm aware of that, I can do something here. I can take a breath. Or I can stew. I can escalate. I can get angrier. I can get more frustrated. I could ask to speak to the supervisor. I could do all those things. And maybe I would do all those things. Sometimes it's appropriate to do all those things, and I do them. But what I need to do right now is change my state. That's the one thing I can change. And the only way I can change it is through awareness. Oh, I'm aware that I'm going down a road. I am down a road I don't really want to be on. I can make a U-turn here. And I know from experience, for me, the breath is my best bet. Now, a lot of people take the help of the breath to shift, to pivot, to turn around, to go in another direction. It doesn't have to be the breath. It could be an image. It could be a sound, a mantra. But the great thing about the breath is it's there. But my teaching has changed. And I may say this over and over and over again, as I do in my classes. I used to say, notice your breath coming in and going out. So I'm focusing on the breath. And now I tend to say, become aware that you're breathing. Because you already are. So it's just a matter of settling your awareness onto the breath that's already there. That's the shift. Where am I putting my awareness? And do I even know that I have it? Do I even know that I'm aware? Sometimes we just get lost in life that we forget that we have that capacity. So that's why we cultivate it. It's like any other skill. It's like any other thing that we're aware of. We cultivate it. We practice it. So in those moments, in the hospital room, on the street during the fight, at the football game, in the store, wherever it is, we can shift because we know that we can. Because we know that there's somewhere to shift into. That's why we practice. And ultimately, this is in some ways no different than talking about how do we uplift our lives. Because in those moments when we're ticked off or we're having a hard time, we can shift into a state of awareness. That very ability uplifts our lives more than anything else. Now, sometimes we choose not to. No, I'd rather be ticked off. I'd rather yell at the ref. It's fun. I'd rather be right. I like that feeling righteous. Yeah. But that's a bad call. Yeah, exactly. So a lot of it has to do with finding these choice points. And that's all about awareness. So again, a shift in my understanding is I used to say, sometimes I still do, but I mean it a little differently than I used to. I used to say that I thought of there being three fundamentals to meditation practice. One is posture. It's how you are with your body. One is the breath. And the third is awareness. And now I understand that when we're looking at our sitting and our posture and our body, what is that? That's awareness. When we're noticing our breath, what is that? That's awareness. So ultimately, the fundamental aspect, issue in meditation practice is awareness. Everything else is related to that, emanates from that.
Wow.